Good evening.
Let's give George a big hand, folks. A really nice turnout here for you. And part my laryngitis. Sorry for my laryngitis. George Allen, ladies and gentlemen.
It sounds like you have more than two people there.
No, it's just me with laryngitis. George, back a long time ago, I heard stories of this guy, but I had no idea where he was. And that's why in the newsletter I put in there, the rumors are true. George Alm is up on Washington Island, and he has the largest collection of amateur radios in the world by anyone. George, how many radios have you got so far?
How many radios?
Well, probably a little over 1,000.
Oh my goodness. Let me turn you down here just a little bit.
And probably 2 or 3 that are in good shape. 200 or 300.
We printed a lot of pictures in the newsletter of all of the radios that you have. Out of all of them, which one do you like the best, George?
Right now, I like the 990 that Kenwood was the last radio they made. And the 870 is an entirely different radio. They both have articles or advertising in this month's QST, either cover or they have spent a lot of money in the last 3 or 4 months in having full page pictures of their the 890 and the 990. And the 990 is a 200-watt radio. The other one is a 100-watt.
Out of all the radios that you have, are all of them operational?
I didn't understand that.
Yeah, are they all operational, George? Do they all work? How much restoration do you put in them?
How much restoration do you put in your radios? Do they all work?
Well, as you may know, radios today have a much longer lifespan because the condensers and resistors are of a better quality. And those that were made in the 1930s or 20s, almost any radio that's really old needs replacement bypass condensers and a retune job, and probably the replacement of more than one tube. There are exceptions to that, but I have a few radios, the SX20 and the Sky Buddy, and a couple others that I've had people rebuild for me with new components. It looks the same, but it all has new components, and they're probably good for another 30 years.
Wow, you've had your license now for 80 years. What was it like 80 years ago when you went in and got your license? What was it like?
What was it like 80 years ago when you first got your license?
Well, I got my license, as I remember right now, in the summer of 1937. And I basically was 7 years old when I got my license, but for a long period of time, every day, I had my mentor, his name is Carl Hassel. Carl had the first radio station in Chicago, and he was on the crew of KDKA in Cincinnati when they first went on the air, but he was not the man in charge. But he put in a station in Chicago, the Border Beach Hotel, which not too many people remember, and it basically was, of course, an AM station, and he also opened on North Sheridan Road in Chicago a building that he rented, which is the equivalent of like a 4-car garage, and that he basically designed radios, built them, and had a friend of his basically go to various YMCA meetings where people gather and bring some of those radios there and either sell them on the spot or give them information where they could get what they wanted. It was a very slow process, and I don't think any radio that he had was sold for over, I would say, $60 or $70 would be high.
What was your very first radio, George?
First radio.
Oh, my first radio was probably a crystal, crystal with a Galena crystal and a set of headphones. And that did very well at receiving all the radio stations in the Chicago area, and they would overlap each other. The best place for a crystal set is away from a big city, because then your ambient noise is less, and you can really get some band spread. So usually would take a cereal box and wind a coil on that, and then get the insulation clean on the coil, and you would move the stator of the thing that you were trying to get the signal, and if you got one or two stations, you'd be lucky. If you were with no stations in a bay, you could probably get 8-10 different stations in the Chicago area. Again, however, to do that today, you can get a crystal radio with a diode that is perfectly tuned for probably $1.50, and you can get the whole radio working for probably less than $3 or $4. And radios in those days, crystal sets, were a lot of people were selling them, but they were lacking an awful lot.
George, what was the first radio that you collected as a collector?
First radio you collected.
As a
Well,
collector?
I think in the late 40s or 50s, I remember going by bicycle to the railroad station. I was in Fairfield, Connecticut, and I basically went to Boston and walked up to when I took my bicycle that I borrowed, and I put it at the railroad station and locked it up with a chain, and then got on the train and went to Boston and went to a radio store there and purchased an HRO 5TA1 at $307, and I bought a Millen exciter with a 6L6 and an 807, and it was made by a man by the name of Millen, very, very known in those days, and the Millen exciter, I have many of them, and they were one of the best pieces of equipment made in the 50s, 60s, 50s and 60s. It was a big job because I had the bicycle there in the railroad station, but when I got back to Boston, I went in to a store that sold surplus, and I bought myself a ski pack, which it had in it white pieces that you could hide with, but they were tacky, and it ended up to make basically a hole. It would hold almost 50 gallons. If you had a 50-gallon of water, it would carry it. You couldn't lift it, but it wouldn't be that big. And I bought the radio new, I bought the Millen exciter used, and I bought lots of other equipment, wire, etc., new soldering iron. And when I got all through, I was able by cab to get back to the railroad station. And when they stopped in Willimantic, I think it was Connecticut, I was able to still find my bicycle on a pole which had a lock on it, and I had then the problem of putting the pack on my back, which I had somebody help me, and I then turned off. It was about, I think, 23 miles to where I was going, and I think it was well over 100 pounds, and when I didn't fall off, and I managed to bike all the way back to Fairfield, Connecticut, which is a boys' camp, camp for boys, which was run out of Chicago, which was called the Chicago Latin School, had a camp in Fairfield, Connecticut, and I was hired as a counselor I ran a rifle range, I ran an archery range, and I ran a pathfinding range, which I taught things of how to track animals and to track people like an Indian. We had a course there, and I enjoyed teaching that. And I have pictures of me now at the range, and I think I must be about 15, 16 years old, and I was there for 3 years in a row, and there I set up a station. And I still have about a dozen USL cards from 1947, 46, 47, that local people that I talked to.
Fantastic. Susan, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Would you grab a chair and come and join us? I'd really like to talk with you too.
Okay.
Guys, on your tables, I spread out some of those Door County magazines. There's a fantastic write-up about George in those magazines. Pass them around so everybody can see them. And you can see all those incredible radios. Those pictures were also put in our newsletter. But if you didn't get a chance to read the newsletter, you can see all those radios. Susan, how are you?
I'm fine, Joe. How are you?
I'm fine. You're a ham too, if I understand right.
No, I'm not. I think that I should be an honorary ham, though, because I'm married.
I think so.
Don't you think that certain wives should be honorary hams because their husbands are such ham radio geeks and they've probably picked up a lot of information over the years?
How many years have you two been married?
I didn't get that one.
How many years have you been married?
Okay, we got married in 77. He is my second husband and I am his third wife. And we have 3 children who are in their 30s.
I saw pictures, in fact I put one in the newsletter, of you and George on that beautiful beach on Washington Island, where they have the kind of rock that only is at Washington Island.
That's Schoolhouse Beach. It's a U-shaped cove, and all of the rocks in there are limestone and dolomite, and they've been tumbled literally for decades, eons, I guess.
There's a fine if you
And
take them.
you're not allowed to take the rocks because they're all like smooth river rocks now. They're highly desirable.
Half the rocks of the beach have been stolen.
Not half. But I want to tell you, Joe, that picture was taken the year before George and I got married.
Yeah.
So we dated for a while.
So when I come up and visit you this summer, I'll bring the rock back that I've got sitting on the mantle of my house.
Now that COVID is almost over, we hope. We'd love to see you.
No, actually, we shouldn't have ended this meeting ever until I tell you that we do have accommodations here. I ran a bed and breakfast first and then a cabin rental for 16 years. And with the right amount of planning, we could have some ham for you guys up here.
Can you guys imagine what it would be like to go to a bed and breakfast with a couple of thousand ham radios? Listen, that would be one you don't want to take the wife to. Yeah. George, you know Dave McCumber, don't you? He's our president, our club president. Dave McCumber, he knows you pretty well.
N9WQ.
N9WQ.
I don't know him.
Yeah, he knows me, he just doesn't remember.
Okay. Say, George, let me ask you. When I grew up as a kid, Heathkitt radio was pretty hot. And I saw some pictures that you have just about every Heathkitt there is. What did you think of those Heathkitt radios? What was your opinion?
I have almost a complete group. I have maybe 75 to 100 radios made by Heathkitt, and that you had to assemble, and all of them, for the most part, worked, and they were fairly priced, and I was very sorry when they went out of business.
So George, what's your opinion? Back in those days, the Japanese came out with the very cheap radios. What was your opinion when they did that, and when they did put Heathkitt out of business? What was your opinion on that?
You have to understand the Second World War was just over, and they were getting started, and Heathkitt did a better job at Globe Radio, and there's 3 or 4 other companies that were in the United States that probably did a better job. But again, there's no question that the Japanese have dominated the ham radio area for probably 20 years.
Is that,
We just lost. But,
in your opinion, George,
but
in your opinion, is that good or bad? Is it good or bad that they're dominating?
Is it good that the Japanese are dominating or bad?
Well, again, I think we need them because they have a certain ability to produce something that works and is on the top area of what somebody can do. I have a German radio, a Heberling, that today is probably worth $15,000 or $20,000, and it was designed and built by Mr. Heberling in Germany, who dominated the military radios. He produced most of all the military radios for the German government, and it's a nice radio, but basically at one time somebody approached them and said, "How much will this radio cost?" And they said, "About $15,000." And he said, "Well, we got to get it cheaper." So he had, I think he had Blaupunkt, a German company, agree to make a copy of the Heberling, more equitably priced and but fairly good, exactly looking like it. And once he did, they submitted the radio to him. It looked like a Heberling, but I think he found over 200 things he didn't like. And as a consequence, he said, "I want the quality of the radio to be as good as it can be." Well, it was pretty good, and it would sell for about $8,000. But he said, "No, I will not allow that." And he violated his agreement and had to pay, I think, $60,000 or $70,000 court fine for not producing and allowing them to use the radio to make money. It was a sad story.
You've got it looks like a complete collection of Collins radio equipment too. What did you think of those radios?
I'm still looking for a KW1. I was offered one 10 or 15 years ago, but I didn't have the funds to buy it. And they only made a number of hundred of them. And if you can find in QSD, you can find out who owns all of them that are available. But I have the 500 watt version, and it is it's the same size as the KW1, but it is roughly 500 watts instead of 1,000. And it uses externally the radio, the KW1 had everything built into it. The smaller radio, which is like a KW1, ended up in having an external PTO exciter, and that came with it, and that was about a $300 item. And I think the cheaper version of the KW1, which is one step down from their best radio, was in the vicinity of $6,000 or $7,000.
I'm going to open up the floor for questions as we go. Just raise your hand if you have a question. Go ahead.
It appears, about looking at the pictures that we have presented here,
Stand by, George.
it appears that you guys need a nuclear power plant to run.
One of our guys says it appears by the looking at the pictures you need a nuclear power plant up there on the island to run all this stuff.
Are they all hooked up?
No, we don't. I hired a man that worked for me in Chicago, who was a ham radio operator, N9JDZ, and he worked for me for a number of years in Chicago, and now he is in charge of the University of Illinois, their computer and medical end of their business. And he basically meets with them 5 days a week on the air for 8 hours, and he was the one who developed the system called Linux, which is a very simple, very easy, no problem thing. And a lot of bigger companies use Linux because it doesn't have many problems with it. And he teaches to use the Linux, and the system that he runs for the university is Linux. So he is the guy in charge of the whole thing. And about a week ago, his father-in-law died a month or two earlier, and his mother, again, living now alone in Wisconsin.
No, in Indiana.
In Indiana, that's right. In Indiana, basically, she's having a hard time living by herself. So he left me a week ago, 10 days ago, and went to take care of his mother. I don't think he's going to like the whole situation, but he still can remote his business wherever he is, but it's not as much fun.
George, if I were to come up by your house and say, geez, I'd like to see that Collins radio working, are all of those radios set up to work? Can you actually show those radios?
All the radios in the ham shack work.
Wow.
All the radios in our ham shack work. We have a 4-car garage with stacks of hundreds of radios, and some work and some are the way I bought them. They're set with the same kind. And of course, I will trade for them. I will sell them at a lower price than most people. The price of shipping it is going to be high, as it is in most cases. But I have all those in my ham shack work, and I had problems with 990, and I tried to send it back to Kenwood, and they said that your months before, all the people that could repair it have quit and left because of Kenwood radio going out of business, and as a consequence, they charged me a handling charge of $150. They shipped it back. That cost $1,000, and they did nothing with it. And then I sent it to a repair facility, a very well-known one on the East Coast, and they looked at it and they said, "Well, we looked at it. That's $150 to look at it, but we can't fix it because we don't know anything about it, and we're not getting involved in it." So I basically, our friend Dave is the fellow we're talking about. He took it apart and found a bad condenser in the current technology. The condenser was worth a penny, and he had to buy for $50. He had to buy a whole box of condensers of various kinds just to get the one condenser. And after he put it in, it was surface technology. Since then, everything is fine.
George, oh, Sue, were you going to say something? No?
No, I'm just enjoying this.
That was on his 990? Kenwood 990?
Did you say that was on your Kenwood 990 that was giving you trouble?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I used to do a lot of travel.
Wait, yeah, question. It was the Kenwood 990 that was giving you trouble, right?
Yes.
Okay.
It had a 1 cent condenser. That's what it costs wholesale. Go bad, and he found it, and he used service technology and replaced it from the stuff that he paid $50 for 100 of them, and everything's been fine since then.
Wonder how many of those radios are out.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. George, all of your radios are in sections. You've got all of the Heathkitt all in one section, Collins in one section. So these are all sectioned off. Out of all the radios that you've got in your collection, which ones are designed the very best, and which one do you think are the very worst?
Well,
which are the best radios you have and which are the worst?
well, some of the original manufacturers, as helicopters, Hammerland, and I could go on, Globe Radio, they did the best they could with what they produced. The quality of parts today are 100% better than you can't find a radio that was made 30 or 40 years ago that the condensers used in it haven't gone bad. It's impossible. And so you have to change all the condensers in the old radios, and those condensers used to cost 5 or 6 cents. Now they run $2 or $3.
Yeah. This is just blowing my mind. This is so unbelievable. What are you going to do with all these radios, George? I understand you're looking for someone to help you put this collection together, so it can be enjoyed forever by ham radio operators.
I'm not planning on going anywhere, and I'm going to take them with me.
And you know what, Joe? I hope he does.
Did you park your car in the garage again?
No.
Would you?
Yeah. There's gonna be, I don't know what's gonna happen. George is 91, I'm 77, so let's say just because of statistics
I
that
don't live more than another 30 years.
so say I'm left with the radios and I still know that I still have my mental faculties. Somehow, we're gonna have to make sure that a lot of ham radio operators out there are happy and that this collection can somehow benefit them. And I don't know what that would be. I don't know of anybody that would take the whole lot. So it seems like we could be having a big ham radio sale here.
Or I
don't know.
have to go to an auction house. There's a showman, a company with the name of Showman, that takes collections of radios, picks them up, sells them, and takes a relatively large amount of money for doing all that. And he also has somebody that looks at all the radios and tells, he won't sell a radio that's not working. And he ends up in saying his technician there will rate the radios he's selling as what condition it is, if it's in like new condition or if it needs lots of work. But he won't sell a non-working radio. But if you put things on eBay, you can get anything.
Yeah.
In most cases, pay for that privilege. There'll be a radio that's selling for $300 that it's not worth repairing.
Yeah. George, what's your opinion of SDR radio? It's new now. Everyone seems to be using it. What's your opinion of it?
Well, I think it serves a purpose. It allows, like we have, I'm on the air every day on 20 meters on a net at 14268, which is called the Ohana Net. It's a Hawaiian network. And the man who developed it died about 2 years ago, but we still have 2 or 3 Hawaiians that will operate on it. And we talk to daily a station in New Zealand, which we've known for many years, on 20 meters, and conditions are getting much better for shortwave radio now with our sunspot cycle. And as a consequence, the radios and communication is so much better. Right now, the 10-meter band, occasionally the 6-meter band, is open a good part of the day, and with 5 watts, you can talk around the world.
Yep. George, out of all those thousands of radios you have you ever sat down to put a value on your collection?
It's all in the eye of the beholder. Again, I would imagine if I would get what it's worth, we're probably talking of a couple $100,000.
Yeah, I would say a couple of $1 million.
But someone would give me more than a torque for each one. So I don't know. It has to be an enthusiast that knows what the radios are worth, and and they'll have to be sold at the going price.
Yeah. And you mentioned the bed and breakfast. I know you guys have been closed because of COVID. But what about this summer, maybe in the fall? Say we put a club party together where we all drove up to meet you on Washington Island some afternoon. Would you allow that?
Well, we have, someone I talk to daily in San Diego is in Chicago today, and he is gonna come up here for a day or two, and he will not get on, with his wife, he will not get on an airplane, so he goes by rail. And he's called me for 2 years now to try to come up to see me, and he was in Chicago, and it's almost a 300-mile run.
Yeah.
And as a consequence,
I want to answer this question too.
as a consequence, he is going to come up here, probably next week.
Easter Sunday, George.
Yeah, and he's been trying for 3 years to get up here. He's in Chicago, and I hope he makes it. He's gonna come up and we will pick him up at the ferry dock, and he will park his car over there, because it costs just to bring it across about $50.
That's round trip
Yeah,
with passengers. Let me just say this to you, Joe. For 15 years, I started out as a bed and breakfast, but we have 2 apartments and 2 cabins. And they're gonna be filled most of this summer with some close relatives and some other things. But in the fall, it's a possibility to do what you're asking. And if you want, afterwards, I will sit down, write you an email and send you some pictures of our accommodations and stuff like that. And we can see what we can put together. That's assuming that COVID doesn't raise its ugly head badly.
Something
We're
like
all vaccinated.
Something like this would be a Sunday afternoon, or a Saturday or a Sunday afternoon just for a few hours, not an overnight.
Oh, okay.
yeah, that's
Yes,
fine.
yes.
It's a long way to travel for a few hours.
Also, the ferry schedule, the Washington Island ferry schedule is online. If you look up Washington Island ferry, and you can find it. And the schedule, there's hot and cold running ferry boats all summer long.
In the wintertime, you have to have a reservation to get here. But in the summer, there's enough ferries, there are no reservations.
Right. It's just, like right now, we just moved into the summer schedule. The ferry schedule, there's a lot of ferries all day long and you don't need a reservation. In the middle of winter, if you were to come, you would have to make a reservation and you'd only have 2 round trips a day. So it's.
Who's got a question for George? Who's got a question for George? Go ahead, Dave.
How many SX-115s and how many SX-88s you hiding up there, George?
SX, what is it? SX?
SX-115 and SX-88.
XS 115 and XS 88s. How many of those you got up there?
Oh, XS 115 and
SX 88?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got SX 88s, and they are made, they were made through World War II. And they're good radios. Obviously, all the component parts that can go bad in the tubes have to be checked and replaced. And I would imagine if you just bought an SX88 brand new and nobody used it, and it was sitting there in a box, it would probably take replacement of 90% of the tubes, all the condensers, and half the resistors. And it probably, to pay for that, would be probably $400 or $500. And a $20 an hour repair.
Who's got another question? Raise your hand. Question for George, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that you might wanna let your friend know that there are no trains running from Chicago up to this.
Yeah, that's a good question. When you mention your friend is coming up with it by train, where does he get off?
He got off in Chicago,
Oh,
then he rents a car.
Oh,
This guy started in
That'll work.
California.
He lives in San Diego, and I talk to him every day normally. But he's right now he went to where my company that I had produced exhibits for the Museum of Science and Industry. And he was all day at that museum and was asking me questions of what I did there.
Enough about him.
Yeah.
We have had many ham radio visitors here.
Sure.
And we have had couples, we've had married couples, both the husband and the wife are amateur radio operators, and we've had them come from foreign countries. People are very interested. I mean, and I like ham radio operators. I really do.
Sure.
I mean, here he is, 50 years or more of this. This is awesome.
George, why did you pick Washington Island and not somewhere here on the mainland next to a big airport?
Well, when I was much younger, in my teens, the business that I was working in, which my father owned, he was looking for some place to go in the winter, other than the Chicago area. And he found a place near Key West, Florida, in Marathon, Florida, and he bought a place there. I located this farm, and the man who owned it, his name was Gentry, and he basically wanted to retire, go back to Chicago, and to spend his last few years there rather than on Washington Island. And he wanted a couple $1 million originally, but I got it for considerably less after bickering quite a while.
Also, 4 full-size telescoping antennas here. So where can you get permits to put those up? We have 300 acres. And we're right on Lake Michigan, facing the Upper Peninsula across the lake, and it's a perfect location. We have a little ham radio forest, and we have a big forest, so a real wood forest.
George and Susan, I want to thank you both so much for this incredible time that you gave us. And George, what an incredible man you are. God bless you. And
you can find me in the afternoon on many 80-meter frequencies. I also will work 160, and I'm on every day on the 20-meter band, 14268.
14268.
And Joe, if you have any questions, you can call me on the phone, and I can get any answers you need. George, most days he wears his hearing aids, and some days he doesn't. It just depends. So, so at any rate, thanks, Joe. And seriously, there's an invitation here if you want to get some guys together and come up. It's okay. Just
There's
let me
no
know.
charge of that.
If you still got that good little pizza place, when the boat docks, you could walk over to that pizza place.
That's my friend Ethan, and we've got a couple of taverns in like the Washington Hotel is here.
Yep.
There's a new bakery, the same old grocery store.
No stoplights.
What grocery store?
It's about 17 people that live here around, permanent residents. It's about 700 people, give or take.
That's how many speeding tickets you can get.
Yeah. How many speeding tickets can you pick up there?
I know Police Tyler, and I know Gary, his sidekick, very well. So, we could talk.
Say, Susan, George,
You'll probably get you out of jail.
thank you so much for an absolutely fantastic interview. You
I
guys,
can see you all at some time.
Yeah.
and we will.
Guys, take care. Thank you.
Nice round of applause for George and Susan.